2 Chronicles Chapter 32. After these things and this faithfulness, Sennacherib the king of Assyria came and entered Judah. And he encamped against the fortified cities and intended to break into them for himself. And when Hezekiah saw that Sennacherib had come and that his face was set to fight against Jerusalem, he took counsel with his officers and mighty men to stop the water of the fountains that were outside the city, and they helped him. So many people gathered together and stopped all the fountains and the brook that flowed through the land, saying, "Why should the kings of Assyria come and find an abundance of water?" And he took courage and built up all the wall that was broken down and erected towers on it and built another wall outside, and he strengthened the Millo in the city of David and made weapons and shields in abundance. And he set battle captains over the people and gathered them to himself in the square at the gate of the city. And he encouraged them, saying, "Be strong and be bold, do not be afraid or dismayed because of the king of Assyria or because of all the multitude that is with him, for there is someone greater with us than with him. With him is an arm of flesh, but with us is Jehovah our God to help us and to fight our battles." And the people relied on the words of Hezekiah the king of Judah. After this Sennacherib the king of Assyria sent his servants to Jerusalem. Now he was before Lachish and all his forces were with him to Hezekiah the king of Judah and to all Judah who were in Jerusalem, saying, "Thus says Sennacherib the king of Assyria, in what are you trusting, that you remain in a siege in Jerusalem? Is not Hezekiah trying to persuade you to give yourselves up to die by famine and by thirst, saying, Jehovah our God will deliver us from the hand of the king of Assyria? Was it not the same Hezekiah who took away his high places and his altars and who commanded Judah and Jerusalem, saying, Before one altar you shall worship, and upon it shall you burn incense? Do you not know what I and my fathers have done to all the peoples of the lands? Were the gods of the nations of the lands at all able to deliver their land out of my hand? Who was there among all the gods of those nations that my fathers destroyed who could deliver his people out of my hand, that your God would be able to deliver you out of my hand? Now therefore do not let Hezekiah deceive you, nor persuade you in this way, and do not believe him, for there is no God of any nation or kingdom who was able to deliver his people out of my hand and out of the hand of my fathers. How much less will your God deliver you out of my hand?" And his servant said still more against Jehovah God and against Hezekiah his servant. And he wrote letters to cast contempt on Jehovah the God of Israel and to speak against him, saying, Like the gods of the nations of the lands that did not deliver their people out of my hand, so the God of Hezekiah will not deliver his people out of my hand. And they cried out in a loud voice in the Jews' language against the people of Jerusalem who were upon the wall in order to frighten them and terrify them, so that they might take the city. And they spoke against the God of Jerusalem as they had against the gods of the peoples of the land, the work of men's hands. But Hezekiah the king and Isaiah the prophet, the son of Amoz, prayed about this, and they cried out to heaven. And Jehovah sent an angel, who annihilated all the mighty men of valor and the leaders and the captains in the camp of the king of Assyria. So he returned with shame of face to his own land. And when he entered the house of his God, some of those who had come forth from his bowels felled him there with the sword. Thus Jehovah saved Hezekiah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem out of the hand of Sennacherib the king of Assyria and out of the hand of everyone, and he protected them on all sides. And many brought gifts to Jehovah at Jerusalem and precious things to Hezekiah the king of Judah, so that he was exalted in the sight of all the nations thereafter. In those days Hezekiah became mortally ill, and he prayed to Jehovah. And he spoke to him and gave him a sign. But Hezekiah did not respond according to the benefit he had received, for his heart was proud, therefore wrath came upon him and upon Judah and Jerusalem. But Hezekiah humbled himself for the pride of his heart, he and the inhabitants of Jerusalem, so that the wrath of Jehovah did not come again upon them in the days of Hezekiah. Now Hezekiah had very much wealth and honor, and he made for himself treasuries for silver and gold and precious stones and for spices and shields and all kinds of valuable goods, as well as storehouses for produce of grain and new wine and fresh oil, and stalls for all kinds of cattle, and flocks in sheepfolds. And he built cities and acquired many flocks and herds, for God had given him very many possessions. And it was this Hezekiah who stopped the upper spring of the water of Gin and directed it down to the west side of the city of David. And Hezekiah prospered in all his works. So also in the matter of the envoys of the princes of Babylon, who had been sent to him to inquire about the wonders that had happened in the land, God forsook him only to test him and know all that was in his heart. And the rest of the acts of Hezekiah and his deeds of faithfulness are there written in the vision of Isaiah the prophet, the son of Amoz, in the book of the kings of Judah and Israel. And Hezekiah slept with his fathers, and they buried him in the upper part of the tombs of David's sons, and all Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem honored him when he died. And Manasseh his son reigned in his place. 2 Chronicles Chapter 33. Manasseh was 12 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 55 years in Jerusalem. And he did what was evil in the sight of Jehovah, like the abominations of the nations whom Jehovah had dispossessed before the children of Israel. And he rebuilt the high places that Hezekiah his father had torn down, and he raised up altars to the Baals and made Asherahs, and he worshipped all the host of heaven and served them. And he built altars in the house of Jehovah, concerning which Jehovah had said, In Jerusalem will my name be forever. And he built altars to all the host of heaven in the two courts of the house of Jehovah. And he caused his children to pass through fire in the valley of the son of Hinnom, and practiced soothsaying and enchantments and sorcery, and appointed mediums and spiritists. He did what was evil in the sight of Jehovah beyond measure, provoking him to anger. And he put the engraved image of the idol that he had made in the house of God, concerning which God had said to David and to Solomon his son, In this house and in Jerusalem, which I have chosen out of all the tribes of Israel, I will put my name forever. And I will no longer remove the foot of Israel from the land that I have appointed for your fathers, if only they will be certain to do all that I have commanded them according to all the law and the statutes and the ordinances given through Moses. And Manasseh led Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem astray to do more evil than the nations which Jehovah had destroyed before the children of Israel. And Jehovah spoke to Manasseh and to his people, but they would not listen. Therefore Jehovah brought upon them the captains of the army which belonged to the king of Assyria, and they took Manasseh captive with hooks and bound him in bronze fetters and took him to Babylon. And in his distress he entreated Jehovah his God and humbled himself greatly before the God of his fathers. And he prayed to him, and he was entreated by him and heard his supplication, and he brought him back to Jerusalem to his kingdom. Then Manasseh knew that Jehovah indeed was God. And afterward he built an outer wall for the city of David on the west side of the Gin in the valley even to the entrance of the fish gate, and he surrounded the offal with it and raised it very high. And he put the valorous captains in all the fortified cities in Judah. And he removed the foreign gods and the idol from the house of Jehovah and all the altars that he had built on the mount of the house of Jehovah and in Jerusalem, and he cast them out of the city. And he restored the altar of Jehovah, and he sacrificed on it sacrifices of peace offerings and thank offerings, and he commanded Judah to serve Jehovah the God of Israel. Nevertheless the people still sacrificed at the high places but did so to Jehovah their God. Now the rest of the acts of Manasseh and his prayer to his God and the words of the seers who spoke to him in the name of Jehovah the God of Israel are there written among the records of the kings of Israel. His prayer also and how God was entreated by him, and all his sin and his trespass, and the sites where he built high places and set up the Asherahs and the idols before he humbled himself are there written among the records of Hosea. And Manasseh slept with his fathers, and they buried him in his house. And Amon his son reigned in his place. Amon was 22 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 2 years in Jerusalem. And he did what was evil in the sight of Jehovah, as Manasseh his father had done. And Amon sacrificed to all the idols that Manasseh his father had made and served them. And he did not humble himself before Jehovah as Manasseh his father had humbled himself, but this Amon multiplied trespass. And his servants conspired against him and killed him in his own house. But the people of the land struck down all those who had conspired against King Amon. And the people of the land made Josiah his son king in his place.